Welcome back to the 8-Seed Velo podcast. I'm Aaron Cohen. I'm joined alongside Ben Rossi and a new 8-Seed Velo member in Max Runde. Maxwell, thank you for joining us today, and we're very happy to have you part of the 8-Seed Velo team.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited. I love talking baseball, and very few around my age enjoy it, so excited.
That's perfect. We always love having another baseball mind. And guys, we just had the baseball trade deadline. It wasn't on July 31st this year. It happened on July 30th, a day earlier. Ended up 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time yesterday. And my goodness, this might have been the best trade deadline we have ever seen. And I want to hear original thoughts and impressions of this trade deadline.
I would say, as a Rays fan, very disappointing trade deadline. But in terms of just general baseball fan, it was amazing. It was so much was going on. I really didn't like seeing the Yankees and Dodgers be as active as they were, but it'll happen when you spend $500 million a year. So I don't know. It was very, very movement oriented.
I just love it this year. I mean, the talent in baseball has just been unreal at this point, and to see a lot of teams going for it at the trade deadline, it just brings such an incredible element of even greater competitiveness to the game of what we're already seeing with, like, it seems like talent almost arguably at an all-time high, like you could say. So I'm just glad to see teams going for it, especially after, I mean, this past off season, it was a little rough. We had difficulties. They were slow with free agent signings. A lot of teams were unsure. There was uncertainty about team spending now, but to see a lot of teams going for it this year, and then other teams who need to build for the future, building for their future, and not having too many teams just like giving up on their players for the future and actually like investing in their future is something incredible. And I just want to point out some of the records for this trade deadline this year that we saw. I heard about on the Baseball Tonight podcast. They mentioned that there were 10 All-Stars traded this year, most ever. 5 players with at least 20-plus home runs, and then there were several. There were 4. I mean, this isn't historical, but there were 4 top prospects traded. So that's still something. In this trade deadline, I think will definitely be one of the more. Not that trade deadlines go down in history a whole lot, but it will definitely be one of the historic ones for whoever wins the World Series too.
And I would even argue that, of course, there's a lot of talent in baseball. There's a lot of young talent too. And I would even argue in previous deadlines, there might have been bigger brand names maybe that was traded. There was obviously huge ones. We'll get into the Dodgers one that you were talking about, and the Yankees ones, of course, one that I'm happy for. I know the A's also had a pretty big trade deadline for them as well. But it's just the movement of players, which Maxwell touched upon. There were just so many talented players, so many top prospects that were moved, and that's what made this trade deadline so ridiculous. We get started off with of course, the biggest one, and that's the Dodgers acquiring Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. And those two are some of the best players in baseball. I would say Scherzer is probably a top 10 pitcher in baseball. Trey Turner might be a top 5 shortstop in all of baseball, and is probably even a top 20 position player. In turn, the Nationals, who are straight into rebuild mode, they got Josiah Gray, who's number 42 MLB prospect, Herbert Ruiz, number 41 MLB prospect, Donovan Casey, someone who has power and speed in Double-A, and Gerardo Carrillo, who has a 4.25 ERA and 59 third innings pitched in Double-A as well. And I would say the biggest thing about this trade is that the Dodgers stole Scherzer and even Turner away in some respects from the Padres, the Giants, and even the Angels.
I'd just say I knew this was all hype and it would never happen because the Rays are the cheapest franchise in sports history. But waking up and seeing Mad Max and Chris Bryant might be going to the Rays, and then the next day waking up and seeing, okay, no longer Mad Max, but possibly Chris Bryant and Craig Kimbrell, it was so infuriating to see him land with the Dodgers. I would have 100% rather seen him on the Padres. I think everything that Padres have done recently has been a great move, and it doesn't seem so much buying people like the Dodgers like to do. I think the weird part about this trade, and I'm going to relate a lot back to the Rays, but the Rays are just one team. I think a lot of teams could have made a better offer. It's just nobody was willing to give up their 1 and 2 ranked prospects, something you rarely ever see in one single trade.
Well, yeah, no, it is kind of difficult when a team's kind of in that mode to give up 1 or 2 ranked prospects. I feel like it was easier for the Dodgers to do something like this, and I actually wasn't surprised the Dodgers ended up being the winning end of this trade in that sense. When you were kind of touching on prospects there, Max, because I was actually thinking. I mean, the window of opportunity, a lot of people say is right now is truly their window of opportunity. It truly is when it might be closing with like some of the players they have locked up, not to mention some of their star players they have on big contracts, kind of underperforming this year, quite frankly. So it was definitely the time. I think the Dodgers really needed this trade in order to really get some momentum on their side in the NL West. I mean, they've been 4-6 in their past 10 games. Giants have actually struggled a little bit in their past. They're actually 5-5 in their past 10 games, so they've struggled a little bit. So the Dodgers knew they had an opportunity. They have an opportunity coming at them to catch the Giants in the division, get ahead of separate themselves from the Padres and Giants, and this is what they did. This is how they exploited their opportunity there. Because I mean, the Giants have such like a great team of guys that they'll be able to build up for the future with like some younger guys who might not go for as much value in the offseason. So they have a window of opportunity. They have a great future window of opportunity, as do the Padres with their players. But for the Dodgers, like, we got to do it now. We did it last year. We got to continue to go all out now. It's our time. So I kind of could see the Dodgers being the leaders in that. And I think this move was like crucial for the Dodgers. If they hadn't done it, they'd maybe be in some trouble.
Only 3 games separates the Giants and Dodgers from first place. Obviously, the Giants are in first right now, and this is a move that essentially warranted the Giants to go out and get themselves a Chris Bryant, at least in some way respond to that type of move. Obviously, it's the biggest move of the trade deadline. You can't match it by any stretch of the means, but getting Chris Bryant to help out with the injuries of Evan Longoria and Brandon Mount, that's a huge, essentially a compensation for missing out on Scherzer. But you guys both hit a nail on it. The Dodgers are the type of team with a ton of resources. They not only financial resources, but they're a good enough team where they already have a lock-in catcher in Will Smith, and they have a lot of talented pitching as well. We can leave Trevor Bauer out of the conversation. That's a whole another podcast if you really want to get into it. But they have enough pitching, of course, outside of him. So to bring in Max Scherzer and to try to repeat as champions and to also avoid that wild card game, which lives up to its name, you never know what's going to happen with it. You can be eliminated in that one game, and that's your season. So this was, as Ben said, a crucial move for them.
I just have a question. This is a bit of a touchy subject. Do the Dodgers make this move if Bauer is available?
It's funny because going into this and I was looking at their pitching, I thought they needed this move in some ways because it wasn't just Bauer they've been missing, but also Kershaw's been missing this past month. He's still kind of just starting to throw at camps, but I'm not even sure when Kershaw will be ready. So they still might make this, but I'm not sure if they'd be able to really have the money on the market to do this trade at the same time if they still had Bauer, because didn't they get a lot? They must have gotten a lot back with recently Bauer. Did they really? I mean, he was administrative leave, but did they officially release him?
No, the Dodgers didn't release him, but they probably did save some money. And once again, this is an organization now has a payroll north of $280 million. So I don't think that was a question. This team already a deal that they can make because they had room for it. They didn't need to get Trey Turner either. They just had Corey Seager, for example, come back into the fray. And now they'll shift Turner, a natural shortstop, over to second base, which he has played before, but it's just an extra move to put icing on the cake for them and make that run into the playoffs where they can repeat as World Series champions.
I think Turner's a very interesting part of this deal too, because, well, one, he offers a lot of versatility both offensively and defensively. He can play second, sure, but he could really help out their outfield too, which he hasn't played in years. But Bellinger has not been that great ever since his MVP season. And they have some good guys. They have Taylor, they have Pollock, but it's not, they don't, Mookie's been hurt also, so that hurts them. I think Turner adds a lot to this team, but he almost, in my opinion, he also kind of guarantees Seager's not going to re-sign.
Mm-hmm.
He's got another year of control, and not that they were likely going to keep Seager regardless, because they got to pay Bellinger, I feel like, unless he just continues to be so bad that he's not worthy of the millions and millions he's going to get. I think this guarantees Seager's out the door, Turner's the shortstop next year, and they'll probably lose Turner the year after that too. It's a bewildering move to get rid of two of your best prospects. But I mean, they're once again, despite the rankings or standings, they're clearly the favorites in my opinion again.
Yeah, I think they definitely are, and it can never hurt to add like that extra pitching piece. Like I feel like hitting is one of those things where like you can have lesser known hitters, you see them break out in the postseason a lot more too. So I can see some of their young guys continue to break out in the postseason, like how I've seen some of their young guys breaking out this year. Pitching, it's a little bit tougher, I'd say. While we have seen younger pitchers break out and do well in the postseason, it's always, I feel like it's always more comfortable for a team and a little easier for a team. Like a lot of the past several World Series champions have had those reliable veterans to rely on that they can really put out there and can really go out there and be confident that they are the dominant guy on the mound. Hitting is one of those things that I feel like can develop a little more in the postseason, if you ask me, especially because guys are playing every day. A lot of those hitters are playing every day during the regular season.
Well, just talking about hitting, it would be huge if the Dodgers do not re-sign Corey Seager, because he won the World Series MVP last year, and he's been such a huge part of this organization, from running Rookie of the Year to helping them get their first championship since 1988 as well. It's going to be a tough way to pass for them, but I think you're right, Maxwell. I think that the Dodgers do not re-sign him after this. I think they'll probably go Turner, who is looking like a better option at shortstop as a player, perhaps anyway. Seager's obviously very talented in his own right, but he's also been injury-prone the past few years, and Turner's starting to have a more healthy end and starting to be more towards his prime as well. So we're probably going to see Turner more so in a Dodgers uniform. I also want to touch back to the point earlier about how the Dodgers were able to trade away Josiah Gray and Kerbert Ruiz. And it seemed like the players or the teams that got the big deals done, they had to do an overpay for this. And I'm talking specifically about the Blue Jays trade for Jose Barrios. Now, there was a lot of teams fielding for Barrios because he's the second best starter on the trade deadline, and there's no one really else that was comparing for him. But the Blue Jays gave away their number 16 MLB ranked prospect in Austin Martin and their number 68 MLB ranked prospect in Simeon Woods Richardson. So to give away those two players, you have to look at the Twins and see this as a major win. And the Blue Jays, they have to make the playoffs now or else it's a bust.
I think this is easily going to be looked back as like the regrettable trade in this deadline. I think Barrios is really overrated. I think as much as he looked amazing as a rookie, like looked like this guy could be very good and be a future star pitcher, his general career has not been that solid. He's got a career ERA just over 4, career whip over 1.2. Like, he's good. He's very valuable. I'd also like to say Kyle Gibson is the second best pitcher in this deadline, but neither here nor there. I just think this Austin Martin guy looks incredible, I think. I mean, he has not done it really well this year in the minors. His slugging is like 340, I think. It's something really low. But he was drafted last year, 5th overall, in which he had Vandy, the last 2 years at Vandy. He hit 385 with an OPS of 1.29. That is ridiculous. And if you're taking him 5th overall and trading him for 2 years of control of Barrios, like, wow, just because he's not a rental and you get a year and 2 months instead of just 2, it's really worth that much. Like, I don't get what Toronto's doing. I mean, a lot of rumors were out there about they might be selling Semien and selling instead of buying, but it looks like they're buying. I don't think it's enough. And their rotation was one of their better parts of their pitching staff anyway. Like Robbie Ray, Ryu. I don't know about Pearson. He's been gone for a while. He must be hurt. But it was just a surprising move, I would say.
Yeah, I just think especially with where the Blue Jays are at in the division, because if you look at two there, I mean, do you really think they even have really a shot at the American League wild card? I mean, they're 8.5 games back here in the American League East Division. It seems like you already have the A's, Rays, Mariners, Yankees all locked up as possible wild cards. I mean, that's just too much. That just to me seems like a little too much to overcome in acquiring a player that plays only every 5 days or so as a pitcher. I mean, they did need some pitching, so I can understand why they go after that pitching, but it still surprises me that they would kind of trade away their future when it still feels like the future is kind of developing there.
Well, that's probably one of the reasons why they went after someone like Barrios and not Scherzer, because that way they have the extra year of control. They might not make it this year, but maybe they can build upon the team for next year as well. And that's when they get someone back like Nate Pearson, and they'll probably get back Kirby Yates as well. They also added Brad Hand, so they improved their bullpen. They also added Joakim Soria. It was still a nice deadline for them. But you look at, again, Austin Martin once again. That pick alone is worth more than Barrios is right now. They probably could have gone away with giving Woods Richardson and a lower level prospect to achieve him, but obviously the Twins were asking for the moon. They wanted the team to go out like the Blue Jays did, and they got their luck in that way. And Woods Richardson is never a nice part of the deal. Obviously, he's not as highly talented as he once was, but he's still only 20, and he still has a lot of time to grow, and it's a nice 4-pitch mix. He could still end up as some of the back rotation, but it's definitely not worth it to get Barrios. He's someone I kind of imagine as someone who throws 7 innings, gives up 4 runs. A nice starter who will eat up innings, but not someone who's an ace. Maybe not even someone who's number 2 starter. It looks like a number 3 starter. Probably the best number 3 starter in baseball, and that's it.
I think Ben was making a great point that not only is this team currently in 4th in the AL East, they have to play the AL East the rest of the season. This is the division that would easily be the best division in baseball, as they are every year, if it weren't for the Giants going absolutely berserk. Like, it's so confusing. Like, I love the Blue Jays. Like, AL East fan here, so I don't want them to be better than the Rays. But, I mean, how can you not like a Vladdy Jr., a Bo Bichette duo? Like, and then you got Pearson whenever healthy throwing 97 with Ryu, who's the most underrated pitcher in baseball typically. It's just very, very shocking. I don't see Barrios adding that much to this team. I think there's such a good chance they're the fourth place team in the AL East, and that just physically isn't even possible to be in a wild card team then.
Yeah, I certainly agree. It's going to be a very tough road ahead for me, even with the Yankees now, and we can kind of transition to that the Yankees did over the trade down. Even with Gallo and Rizzo, I still am very skeptical about them making the playoffs because they still don't have enough pitching. They still don't have enough starting pitching. You look at Garrett Cole and Jordan Montgomery. Well, that's a solid 1-2. You can round out the rotation a little bit with Herman and Tyone and Cortez, but they're not a playoff rotation. And Cole's also has choked 4 times now against the Red Sox and the Rays. And he's probably still the front runner for the AL Cy Young, probably bearing Lance Lynn and Carlos Rodon. But that's a very good reason not to give it to him because of how he has not done well when the Yankees have needed him the most. So they add something like Andrew Heaney, and sure, that's another depth piece, but seeing what the Yankees could have done and maybe gotten Barrios and Scherzer. It makes sense why they passed on it because they want to hold on the top prospects. They have a thin system already. So going the route they did make sense, getting those two lefties as a start, but it's going to be very difficult getting past the Mariners, getting past the Blue Jays at this point, and getting past the A's. And then even that, they'll have the wild card game against the Rays, who Maxwell, as you know, usually have the Yankees number in recent years.
And that is all thanks to the one and only G-Man Choi, who absolutely rakes Cole for some reason. Don't know why, but he just does, and it's amazing to watch. But I think the Yankees moves, I'll give them credit for this. I don't know a ton about the prospects they gave up, but it doesn't look like they gave up that much. And Gallo, I love. Gallo, he might hit 220. Cool. He's going to New York. New York is the Polo Grounds of the modern era. They just needed one lefty. You cannot have Brett Gardner and Aaron Hicks be your best left-handed power hitters in your lineup, like at all. And getting Gallo was just something they had to do, I think. I think Cashman and all of their management would look so dumb if they continue to just widely ignore their pitching issues and go out and get a bat. Let's just say this. If they only got Rizzo at this deadline, it would be a very confusing decision. I think Rizzo and Gallo do bring one other essential thing that they needed other than the left-handed bats, and that's defense. I've never seen a pro baseball team be so unfundamental, is that even a word? In my life, like they make base running errors daily. They don't hustle down the base path. They got 3 DHs, if not more, and they're all right-handed DHs. And now the issue with this, though, is you didn't trade Voit. As much as it was rumored that they might be getting a pitcher for Voit, you didn't. And Rizzo can only play first, really. He might have played outfield like a couple times in his life. But they're already log jammed out there. And what are they going to do? Are they going to take a Gold Glove best arm in right field in the American League and throw him at DH or throw him at first or third? It's a great move. They didn't they didn't lose too much. They had to get a lefty in that batting order. Here's how I'll put it. The Yankees' unwillingness to address their pitching is sort of similar to the Rays' unwillingness to spend the money.
You know what? I think you definitely hit it there. I mean, they just kind of, it seems like they definitely have like the names for the pitching, but they just haven't been performing a lot and enough for the kind of performances you'll see here. And I mean, I just wonder if like they really need to get 2 bats like that, like 2 left-handed bats like that, especially with like Luke Voit occupying first base. I think they could have just maybe gone with Joey Gallo as a left-handed bat, and then also gone after maybe another pitcher. But that was only just another thought there. And speaking of, I mean, not going after pitching, it just seems like the AL East was kind of quiet at this deadline when it came to that whole thing. Like I was also surprised. Another team I was surprised about was the Boston Red Sox. I mean, their pitching's good, but I just don't know if they really have that it factor in their pitching rotation. I mean, if I'm looking at the pitching rotation, it's looking like, I mean, a lot of their guys have ERAs north of 4. Nathan Eovaldi can be a solid is like a solid ace for them, but then behind him, I'm just not sure if they have enough of that starting pitching that's gonna get them through in the postseason. So I was actually a little bit surprised about the Boston Red Sox making such a blockbuster deal for Kyle Schwarber, one of the hottest hitters, while they too needed a lefty. So that felt like another AL East potential blunder here at the trade deadline I'd like to keep an eye on for.
The Red Sox only got Kyle Schwarber and Hansel Robles essentially at the trade deadline, which doesn't feel like enough, especially how the White Sox respond. And we'll get to that. But you guys are right about how the Yankees could have easily gone Gallo and then gone after a starting pitcher as well. Now, I still stand by what I said. I still think if they were to try to go after Barrios and Scherzer, they would have to give up a lot. They would have to give up a Davey Garcia or maybe a Clark Schmidt, which I don't think the team is ready to do yet. And I think there's still a place for Rizzo and Voit, because I think what the Yankees are at least showing the Marlins series is that they want Stanton to play left field. And I'm wondering if that's what they're going to try to do moving forward. They'll get him more reps in left field. He'll be the DH until Voit comes back. But when he does, Stanton can play left. Gallo or Judge can mix between center and right. Voit takes over the DH duties, and Rizzo plays first base. And I think that would give them the best defensive alignment, too, because Gallo's a great defender. And I think he's a lot better in center field than Judge is, for example. I think they should keep Judge where he's best. Rizzo's a great defender at first base. And now you push Ruben Odor to the backup role. You push players like Brett Gardner to the backup role, Higashioka back to the backup role too, because Sanchez won't be DHing as much. So I think that's a good idea. Now, once again, pitching is the biggest problem. The Yankees still, instead of getting Heaney, who may be another depth piece, they could have gone after a Ryan Tepera or a Joakim Soria because they're putting a lot of pressure and trusting Chapman, Green, Weiser, and Britton, which are all not their 2020, 2019 selves. And they're also banking a lot on Corey Kluber and Luis Severino coming back from injury, from really substantial injuries, and being a force in rotation after Cole, who once again has struggled against big teams. So I am very wary about this team making it far in a deep postseason run.
I will say it is pretty enjoyable just to see a lineup card that could have Stanton, Judge, Gallo. Like, you could have 3 straight home runs all traveling over 500 feet and having exit velos over 115. Like, it's a Yankee splash move is really what it is. I would say it's them just doing what they've done ever since CC Sabathia was the last big name they got other than Cole. And I mean, like, they just refuse to improve their pitching unless it's bullpen. And I don't know. Their bullpen's been pretty good this year. Chapman was the worst all-star in the entire game. I wrote a whole piece on it and not deserving it, but it's neither here nor there. I think you're right, though. I don't see it as enough. I think Oakland's pickup of Marte will really help, and I think the East might only have 2, unless the Red Sox really fall off, which won't happen with Chris Sale coming back.
Yeah, I was actually going to say with the Red Sox rotation, yes, they do have Chris Sale coming back, so that could have also been why, but I still think the Red Sox could add to the rotation. So I think the AL East is still an open book. I'm not saying it's necessarily the Yankees are necessarily have an aid to be a part of it, but like I still think it's an open for like a team like the Rays, and I think it could come down to the Red Sox and Rays too there. But we'll see how if the Red Sox can continue to play consistently like they've been playing overall, even with like not the best pitching, they're looking to have that division kind of based on the way things have been going. And then you just brought up the Oakland A's and the Starling Marte trade. I think that's fantastic. The A's get a guy like Marte. I mean, that's been like the A's weakness. Earlier, I was concerned that the A's didn't have that it factor in their pitching staff. They would need to go after another starter or something at the trade deadline, but now it's starting pitching is starting to come together. They got that other bullpen piece there from the Cubs with the acquisition of Andrew Chafin, and but then other than that, I think it was great that they went for Marte. I mean, Marte has one of the best abilities to get on base in this game, and we need more of that to set up for our offense. Because quite frankly, I mean, that offense of ours has been definitely underperforming for the A's. It looks like it's starting to pick up in the past couple of games, but they need kind of more of that bat in the lineup who will show good discipline and get on base there, and who can also make some explosive plays out in center field. So now we have a pretty stellar fielding out three guys in our outfield, which I really like the look of, because you can now just remove Ramon Laureano to right field with the way they got Marte, because Ramon Laureano has a phenomenal outfield arm. So I like how the Marte deal sets us up for a potential wild card race. Will it be enough to really get us through some of these other American League powerhouses in the postseason, though? That's the part I still don't know about. And I mean, every A's fan always has every right to be skeptical about that, given that we've always dropped stuff in the postseason. So that would be interesting to see.
I would say the A's, what they really did during this trade deadline is they added depth. You mentioned how they have a really good outfield now in Canna, Marte, and Laureano left to right. And then now they can move someone like Chad Pinder over towards shortstop, where he it's a little bit more natural to play. You don't have to start Elvis Andrus, who's been he has been a disaster for the team. You can move
He's been
Josh
doing better
Harrison.
lately.
He's been doing better lately. Okay, so maybe not as much of a disaster, but I know the start of the year, at least the first half, he has been absolutely terrible. And at least Chris Davis wasn't doing too hot in tests as well. So it's just kind of a lose-lose situation. But now you have Josh Harrison, who can play second base as well. You push Steven Piscotty to the bench as well with this move. Yan Gomes was a phenomenal pickup as well because he's been a really above-average catcher this year, and he's been one of the best catchers at throwing out base runners too. So very underrated moves for the A's. It is a little bit tough to see them lose Jesus Luzardo, though, to the Marlins because he was someone who's very highly touted. But that's what happens when you have guys like Chris Bassett and Cole Irvin who have just been carrying the rotation this year.
I just think this is the Oakland Athletics and Rays, East Coast, West Coast, same thing, really. This is not at all a small market move. You have a guy who's a former top 10 prospect who is a year or so removed from being a Cy Young final or predicted to be a Cy Young winner, possibly. And you have 4 more years of control, and you trade him for 2 months, like guaranteed 2 months. Mm-hmm. Like, unless the Athletics break their spending and put in some money, this is bold. I think it's going to work because Luzardo just seems lost right now. And Marte's been very, very big for the past 2 years, really, if not more. It's just weird. It's not quite Snell being traded to the Padres, but it's a bold move. It really is. And I'll say this, as a Marlins fan, this is best case scenario by far. By far. You get a guy who has all of the talent and has all of the accolades to become something good, and you have a pitching coach, you have whatever is going on in your front office that is making all these super young pitchers really good, and you have them in a new environment and you have the ability to groom him, start over, the Marlins pitching staff could be really dangerous in the coming years.
I do think that Jesus Luzardo could have a good chance to turn himself around there. I mean, he started out great for the A's last year. He had some good eyes, but I mean, there are still some inconsistencies. His struggle with some of his command and his delivery, and then of course he had some injury struggles with us. But I could definitely see him being one of those guys who turns himself around there with a team that's developing like the Marlins, because he too is like a young guy developing. So I mean, I'm gonna miss Lazar. He was a lot of fun to cover, a lot of fun to watch. He had such a great mix of pitches. He has definitely a lot of potential in the league. I thought that didn't really fully show in his time in Oakland. I still have a lot of faith in. I just think, and with the way the A's are competing right now, it just didn't seem like we maybe had a spot for Luzardo exactly, especially not even in our bullpen, to be honest. I mean, given how I feel like our bullpen's pretty well figured out, especially with the addition of Andrew Chafin. So I think Miami will be a good place for him to develop, and it should suit him well, at least for the next year or so.
That's a fair point. As much as Jesus Luzardo has so much promise, for example, he also might not have fit with the A's, and the A's are in win-now mode. Now, maybe I would still argue that's a little bit of a winning trade for the Marlins in this sense, and they look stacked with the rotation. You look at Trevor Rogers, Sixto Sanchez, Eliezer Hernandez, Luzardo now being one of the lower options in Amish, but he's still an option. So they're looking like a really good pitching team. They still have a winning run differential, which is more than, for example, the Yankees could say right now. So it is pretty interesting to see where that team is heading. But one team that has no doubt in my mind right now that is the best team in the AL is the White Sox, because not only did they pick up Craig Kimbrell and Ryan Tepera in the deadline, kind of fleecing the Cubs in some sense, though Madrigal, I will admit, that's a very nice pickup for the Cubbies. They're in win-now mode, and they also are getting back. They just got back Eloy Jimenez, and they'll get Luis Robert by the end of the season. This is looking like the most sound team there, with the best bullpen. They have probably the best starting rotation. I know the A's are right up there too, and they have a very sound offense as well.
I'll say this: it's it's not a typical move, to say the least. You're trading for a veteran relief pitcher who has been astounding, unbelievably good, no doubt about it. But you trade up a Madrigal, one of the only hitters in that hitters, pure, I'm going to get on base, I'm going to hit a double in the gap, I'm going to score these power hitters. And you trade him for 2 years, 2 expensive years of Craig Kimbrell, who, when he first came to the Cubs last year, struggled. Granted, that's because there was no spring training and he had been gone for so long. I think it's a good move. It's weird. They have Liam Hendricks. They paid Liam Hendricks a lot too. They have a good bullpen. It's the 12th best ERA in all of baseball for bullpen, 7th best team ERA in all baseball. It's weird, and I think the only reason you can truly reason giving up Madrigal is the fact that you acquire Cesar Hernandez also, who's shown very good defense, surprising power numbers this year, actually. Oh, I was listening to, it was either that podcast you mentioned earlier, Adam, or it was a different one, and I think his launch angle's up like 4%, and it's actually really showing well for him.
I really think. No, I too was shocked at that move, having like a closer like Liam Hendricks, especially how Liam Hendricks has proven he can go pitch in multiple innings to close out games. He can be a closer that pitches in the 8th, 9th, occasionally even the 7th. But I kind of see maybe Craig Kimbrell might embrace some kind of new role as like a setup man or something in the White Sox bullpen. But it can't hurt to have that extra arm of relief. I feel like when it comes to like the postseason, them trying to get through and have that big factor. I mean, that was a big thing that kind of helped the Nationals to get through their whole thing in 2019. They got some clutch help, or no, not the Nationals, but like some of the other World Series teams got a lot of that help from their bullpen down the line, or having those breakouts in the bullpen. So I think that should suit them pretty well. They already have it pretty well figured out offensively. I mean, Tim Anderson, one of the hottest hitters in the game right now. Jose Abreu is having a pretty good season. So I overall like that move, but like you, I was surprised they went that big with going after a guy like Craig Kimbrell.
I do agree. I don't think Madrigal makes sense for them to give it. They probably could have picked out a different prospect to give away. And I'm sure as soon as the Cubs saw they could get Madrigal, they're like, okay, well, let's go for it. Why not? It's not going to get any better than that. He's going to be really a 300 hitter in the major leagues for a long time. They can shift Nico Horner to the outfield if they need to. It's perfectly fine for them. So kudos to the Cubs for doing that. And I think this is what the White Sox are playing. I think they're trying to bridge the gap between their starting rotation and the bullpen as much as they can, because they already have Hendricks. They already have Crochet and Bummer. So they're pretty set already, but now adding Kimbrell to the mix, it just becomes that much easier. To pair to a very fine reliever in his own right, who even got a surprisingly down-bound MVP vote last season as well, of being mistaken for Trey Turner. So the White Sox, of course, they have a lot going right for them. I don't think it was the best move to give away Madrigal, but it seems really hard to imagine the Red Sox or the Astros or the A's have a more sound team than them. Maybe offensively in some respects, but altogether they look like the team to be in the AL.
I think this move does do one big thing that is kind of slept on. It might the numbers might not back it up, but when you just hear these next 4 names, I want you to tell me you can name a better 2 lefty, 2 righty like combo group. Craig Kimbrell, Liam Hendricks, Crochet, and Bummer. Mm-hmm. That is destroying all types of matchups. And it's plain filthy is all it is.
Yeah, and I mean, it's especially big. But the one thing is, in terms of all the matchups, though, we do have the 3-batter minimum rule now, so that's going to be a little hard. The matchups actually kind of came to bite the White Sox a little bit in that wild card series against the A's last season. I was following pretty closely, but I just think these guys, nonetheless, I mean, their stats I think are still pretty good against like the other kind of hitter, because we're kind of past that lefty-righty era, but this is still like a filthy mix of pitchers that you want in your rotation.
I wouldn't call Bummer or Crochet a lefty specialist, and of course they probably are better against lefties just because their style and just because the matchup, but they should be able to hand righties. They still give more options out of the pen. For example, a team has a bunch of lefties in a row. They could go to that. Or teams a bunch of righties in a row. Well, they now can go to Hendricks and Kimbrel. So, or even Tapera if they really needed to. So they have a very good 5 relievers, at least in the bullpen, which is a lot better than most teams can say. I do want to transition to some of the losers in the trade deadline. And, we can look at probably the biggest loser to start off. And I want to get into some of the lesser thought losers, but I would say the biggest loser is the Rockies. I mean, how in the world are you not trading Trevor Story and John Gray in their final year as a Rocky? Will be their final year. There is little chance or little doubt in my mind the Rockies will be able to resign those two. And I know the Rockies said that we don't want to become a shipping place or shipping grounds for our best players and give Story over to the Nationals, to the Cardinals, who probably could have used, and they probably could have shifted the genre a little bit, but they need to sell these guys. They're a second to last place team. I'll really call them last place team in any other division because they have the Diamondbacks in their division, but they're a team that needs to rebuild, and they didn't do that. They missed a huge opportunity. I heard from my father that maybe they want to tie these two players to draft pick conversations, but from what we saw at the deadline, they easily could have gotten better than a compensation pick.
Yeah, I think your dad's right on point because I saw something about this GM for the Rockies has an incredible history of drafting really well. He's got Arenado, Tulo, Story. He really values those compensating picks.
Okay, the trade deadline is come and gone.
Is that really all that they could get? I don't know. It's just Trevor Story's really good. And a lot of teams were inquiring for him to play outfield. Like some really surprising stuff.
Sorry about that, Tim.
I don't know. It's kind of suiting for how the Rockies have been ever since the Arenado trade. I don't know. Weird decision for them not to go for it. I think there are bigger losers at this deadline. I think they just decided not to do anything, which I guess is fine. I think the Padres lost pretty big, even with getting Frazier and a couple other pieces. I'm just so confused as the Rays. Like, you trade for Nelson Cruz, and then you trade 2 of your best pitchers.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't make sense.
I think, I definitely would have to put the Rockies as one of the biggest losers out there. Like they definitely had the opportunity. It's not like they have like the greatest farm system either. So like if this was a good chance for them to rebuild that sort of farm system of theirs. I mean, the only like real defense I can think of, a reasoning behind that is they really see a lot of potential in like Herman Marquez, who is having a great season, their all-star pitcher, or they see a lot of potential in Ramiel Tapia that they think this season is like the start to something big and they might want to keep them in the future. But they're going to be able to sign them to long-term things or long-term contracts in the future. Or I just feel like that makes it even more ironic, come to think of it, that like they would not bother to trade these guys and see the potential in them. Like maybe they might be having their doubts about those guys and they want to trade them, but I really don't understand. I mean, you're with the draft pick. I mean, how likely is it with their compensation draft pick that they're going to get like a Mike Trout or what? I mean, it's true. There's always a possibility, but I just don't really see them getting like that same kind of value they might have been able to get out of the trade there. And the Padres, I was a little surprised they didn't acquire as much. They lost down a lot there, but they did get Adam Frazier though, so they did kind of fill a solid void at second base there. So even they didn't have an exact loss. I don't know if the Rangers maybe had a chance to do stuff. They didn't really do a lot. I feel like they didn't get much during the trade deadline. They seem like another loser there too, in my view.
Yeah, they did give away Kyle Gibson and Joey Gallo, but they didn't really receive the best prospects. I mean, I will say getting Spencer Howard is a nice pickup, but he has also struggled at the major league level too. So not the best deals for them. I would definitely say the Padres do not have a strong trade deadline, but that's more because they missed out on Barrios and Scherzer more than anything else. And the Giants and Dodgers got better. So they're still looking like the third best team in the NL West. They'll make the playoffs, probably, but it's a little surprising. It would also add into the mix. The Reds are kind of a bit of a loser. Now, I don't know exactly what they could have done. I mean, they could have maybe gone after the big names, but they're not really a team to do that. It's just when you're 4 games back to the Padres, and the Padres don't have a strong trade deadline, it looks bad that the Reds didn't really do anything to improve their team.
I think as much as I have a history in Milwaukee and some ties there, and their pitching has been remarkable. They're not even having Christian Yelich provide a solid at bat right now, plus he's hurt. Brewers have not really, they're pretty accustomed to just falling off at times. And at some point in time, you got to think one of the best trios in recent history's got to just relax. Like Woodruff, I've watched for years now. I remember him hitting a home run in the playoffs against the Dodgers. Like, he's very good. Freddie Peralta, very good. Can't throw too long in the game, but their bullpen's remarkable. And then the other one, Burns. Burns had that crazy streak to start the year. I think it's just they could crumble. I'm not saying they will or that they should or have any reason to do so. But when you're relying on Willy Adames to be your best hitter right now, it's a little bold by the Reds. I mean, plus they got the wild card. I mean, I don't know. It just with such big bats in Castellanos and Winker too, and not to build more around them, it's a little surprising for sure.
It definitely is. I just think the Reds, this could be one of their years, could be one of their chances to break through, especially because they're playing against some weak opposition there these next months in the NL Central. Like even the Cardinals, like it's not a done deal for them. They might have some of those struggles, but like I think even the Cardinals got better upper hand though by the trade deadline. That was the last team I wanted to touch on. I mean, the fact that they got 2 pitchers to hopefully fill those starting pitching voids left by McCollis and Flaherty, who are both hurt. So, like, yeah, it is kind of bizarre. Like, I even think now that the Cardinals might have a better team moving forward there in the NL Central. Now the Cardinals might have more potential in the race with because even they made some more moves during the trade deadline there.
I think the Cardinals were right in trying to add a couple arms to their rotation. They're not quality arms by any stretch. That means Lester is way past his prime. Jay Happ is just downright awful. I've seen him pitch twice now in Minnesota. And being a former Yankee fan, too, he was very up and down for them. Or being a Yankee fan, and Happ being a former Yankee, that's what I should say. I'm still a Yankee fan, of course, but Happ not doing well is not surprising me. I think that was the most lopsided trade, or one of the most lopsided trades we saw, that the Cardinals gave up John Nat, who, of course, has his troubles with the walks, but giving up him for Happ and also throwing in Evan Siskin there, who has a 3.60 ERA and 20 innings of work at Double-A, that was a very poor move. So I wouldn't consider the Cardinals a loser, but they are certainly not a winner in this trade deadline.
I think one last team I would like to include, despite them having probably the best trade of the entire deadline, except for maybe the Dodgers getting 2 All-Stars, is, all right, the Twins clearly got a lot from the Barrios trade.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't trade Buxton, they didn't trade Donaldson, they didn't trade Kepler, and they didn't trade, oh God, I'm missing one. Either way, they had a lot of names that they could have easily moved on from that they're going to lose. And they just sat idly by, hoping for the best. And they're not good. They're not making a comeback. They're way behind Chicago. And I love the Barrios trade. They did a great job there. But to not move Donaldson is shocking. He's a good, powerful bat. Good right-handed hitter, can still hold his own at third base, I'd say. Worst comes to worst, throw him at first. Like, it's just, they missed out. They missed out, for sure.
I would even say in some respects, if Donaldson was more available, would the Mets still gone after Javi Baez? Because then he could put McNeil at second and put Donaldson at third, and it would have costed less. They probably wouldn't have to give up Pete Crow Armstrong, who was one of their best prospects. So that's kind of a move too. We also didn't touch upon the Mets and the Phillies, for example, some of the NL East teams that got better over the deadline. The Mets got Javi Baez, and I just find it hilarious because this was just classic Steve Cohen era move where Francisco Lindor said, "Hey, I'd love to play with Baez," and then he goes out and does it. We didn't see this with the Wilpons. This is great, and I know Baez, of course, overhyped. He's a sub 300 bat. I mean, on base percentage, he is not the Baez he was a couple years ago. It still makes the Mets offense stronger, and they added that ever depth piece in Trevor Williams too. So it was a nice pickup for them. They remain competitive, and the Phillies, they are also trying for it in the NL East. We can't forget the Braves as well. The Phillies got Kyle Gibson, and they also got Hans Krause, who looks like a very intriguing option too. So they got better with their already good starting rotation. I know that Gibson's had a few bad starts as of late, but still a very nice picking up to get what Matt sort of described as second best starter on the trade deadline. And then the Braves too, they totally revamped their outfield. They got Adam Duvall back. They got Eddie Rosario. And those guys will be great to replace Ronald Acuna Jr., who missed out, and also Christian Bachet, who was just demoted too. So that was very nice of both of them to still remain in the East. They didn't have to. They didn't have to do that. The Mets still up ahead by 4 games, but they still want to remain competitive this year. They still understand that this is their window, and their fan base is to be very happy with them.
I think the full mindset here has to be, we can beat the Mets as long as DeGrom isn't pitching. Like, the Phillies have a good staff. Zach Wheeler, very good this year. And picking up Kyle Anderson, who I like a lot, and now looking at his numbers, he has really struggled recently. But I think it makes him competitive at least. I still really, really hate the Bryce Harper contract so much. But I think they can maintain a relevancy throughout the season. The Braves, I love the Braves. They have a good roster. Their roster's hurt and or missing. And I just think it's weird. They tried replacing one of the best players in baseball with 4 outfielders. Like, it's a weird decision. They're going to lose 2 in the offseason most likely, unless they sign them back quickly. And then they got $17 total million in a mutual agreement between Jock Peterson and Duvall. Jock, I have a personal bias towards him, but Duvall I like. Duvall's solid. I think he might stay because I think they regret letting him go in the offseason, and it's only $7 million to keep him back next year. I just don't think either team are on par with the Mets. And that's crazy to say, I feel like, but the Mets have really pitched well. And as much as I'm against this Baez trade, which Baez, they didn't give up that much, I guess. I mean, they did lose, what was his name again?
Crow Armstrong.
Yeah, they lost him. I think the bigger question here is, why Baez? Why not Bryant? I understand Bryant may have been already heading towards San Francisco, but Baez is royally overrated and has been for a long time. And I think the one aspect he's not overrated in is defense. And you already have a very defensive-minded shortstop. He's hurt, sure. But the one stat I pulled here, Baez has a defensive WAR right now of .08. In 32 more games last year, his WAR, wait, I'm reading this wrong. Okay. His WAR right now is 1 less than it was last year, his defensive WAR, on 32 more games this season. So he's not even doing it that much defensively either.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting you put there, because I mean the big hype about Baez too was not so much his offense. I mean, he's supposed to form a dynamic duo up the middle with like Francisco Lindor, but I do think that it could be a good, at least temporary, because it's not like Lindor is back either though. So they did need something up in their middle infield there for the time being too, is maybe another explanation for that. But I just don't know if I see like Baez acquisition necessarily being worth it for the Mets, though I still think the Mets kind of have a good hole in the division. I think the Phillies might have some decent pitching, but then I look at the Phillies hitting, and a lot of their guys are actually not hitting particularly great. Like there's a lot of mostly it's been a lot of sub 300 guys in their lineups. I mean, obviously a lot of the leagues not been hitting great either, but they haven't been showing as much power either. So like I still think the Mets kind of have that edge. If not maybe if the Braves offense breaks through and they get a little bit better pitching, then maybe they could catch them. I still think the Mets have a good competitive edge in the league, and they might not even need to necessarily get Baez there to still be atop.
I would agree. And even with Jake DeGrom not coming back now until September, they still have Taijuan Walker, still have Marcus Stroman. So to just add Baez to that mix, he's not the best player, of course, on the market. They usually kind of gone with Chris Bryant, or maybe had the Twins dangled Josh Donaldson, but more heavily they could have gone with him because they probably wouldn't have to give up as much. It's still not a bad idea to get Baez, an already struggling offense, and already struggling defense for the most part as well. At least in the outfield, their defense is not as great. So short of the infield defense, I mean, then it has to mean a little bit of something. So not a bad idea from the Mets. I still think they do have a big hold on the East, even with the Phillies getting a little bit better, and same with the Braves. It's going to be a lot to overtake them, even without the DeGrom. Before we wrap this up, I also want to cover another team right now that we really, or another two teams rather, and that's the Astros and the Rays. And we can start the Rays because I know Maxwell is here, and just giving up John Curtis and Diego Castillo and Rich Hill, I was very surprised with that after what you said about them being very competitive and getting Nelson Cruz added to the mix.
Well, I think the craziest part is you didn't need to touch this bullpen at all. At all. It's a little hurt right now, but you're going to get Anderson back soon, who's one of the best pitchers in one of the best relief pitchers in baseball at least. And you go and trade your closer, who's 14 of 16, has a 2.65 ERA, under 1 WHIP on 37 innings. Like, he just got a save the other day. Trade him. And I don't know. I think the weirdest part, though, is just you don't see the Rays give up a 10 and 17 ranked prospect in their system for a 41-year-old nonetheless, and then not do anything else. They got a couple other guys. You trade Rich Hill, second most innings on the year, second best ERA on the year, not counting Tyler Glasnow, who is getting Tommy John, which is terrible. I don't know. The one thing I'll say is you had to trade Rich Hill. And I think Rich Hill will help the Mets, especially with DeGrom out. You just can't have your starting rotation going into the playoffs, have Ryan Yarbrough, Rich Hill, and Josh Fleming all control movement-based pitchers with not the same arm slot, I guarantee. Like, definitely not the same, but they're the same pitcher. They have their different pitches, whatnot. It's just too much of the same. I am just so mad we did not get a starting pitcher. I don't care if it's anybody. I just need any innings eater. Give me Bartolo Colon out of the Mexican League. I don't care. We cannot. The Rays have been doing it for 15 years now. They rely on their relief pitchers like most teams rely on their ace. It's shocking. It really is. And I can't overstate enough. Joe Ryan is good. Joe Ryan's representing Team USA right now in Tokyo, and in his 57 innings in the minors in AAA this year, he's got a 3.63 ERA and a under a 0.8 WHIP. It's weird. I love Nelson Cruz. We needed a right-handed hitter. We struggle against lefties a lot. I'll end it by saying one last thing. I apologize. Trade Kevin Kiermaier. I love defense. Sure, he's amazing at what he does. Trade Archer, too. Two of the most tenured Rays ever. They're just both way overpaid for as little as they do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't blame you for how you're looking at the Rays here with all those trades, and then not to mention, I mean, they didn't do a lot with like to build up on. I mean, that was great that they got Nelson Cruz as a bat in the order, but I mean, I'm surprised that they went with like that they didn't do that. They went with like trading a lot of pitching. It doesn't seem like they got a lot of bats in return there with their moves either. It was the other big thing. I don't know if you kind of noticed that with the team.
I'll say this: the one thing about the Rays, don't ever question their trades. They know what they're doing. They trade David Price. Who cares? Just won Cy Young. Doesn't matter. We'll trade Jeremy Hellickson. Just won Rookie of the Year. Doesn't matter. Trade Matt Moore. Trade them all. Who cares? We're going to be in the playoffs again. We're going to have some random guy come up in the last month of the year and be our best player, like Randy Rosarena. You could argue he's the greatest postseason hitter ever. And he was not at all useful to this team up until the last month of last year.
Yeah, it's hard to question what the Rays do. I agree with you there. But the starting rotation, as you said, it was pretty weak. I know that Luis Patino threw an excellent start against the Yankees the other day. But having him in the playoff atmosphere is just a whole nother ball game. Having him as maybe your number 2 pitcher in that matter is just – it's pretty bizarre. So that's going to be interesting. Another team that also doesn't have too much starting pitching right now, that's the Houston Astros, a team that we did not touch upon. They have Zach Greinke, sure. They have Framber Valdez, who's doing great. But expecting Justin Verlander to come back and be the pitcher he was after not really pitching since that miraculous 2019 season, that's asking for a lot. I know they added to the bullpen, which is, I think it's good. I think that was a weak part for them. They added Emi Garcia. They added Kendall Graveman, who's having a phenomenal season for the Mariners this year, and Rafael Matera, too, who they're trying to have him as a reclamation project, essentially. So not a bad way to go there. But not adding a starting pitcher for them, too, that's got to hurt. That's not looking like a strong point for the Astros right now. They don't have the bullpen like the White Sox do, or the Rays do for that matter, where they can really bridge the gap.
I think one last thing on the Rays, I promise. The Rays have fully committed to the idea of every pitcher on our staff needs to throw 3 innings and no more. And it seems to be working. They invented the opener, and now they're inventing one time through the rotation, or the batting order, that's it. The Astros, don't want them to succeed at all, but they're good. They're very, very good. And even with the little pitching they've had this year, the West is just not competitive. Like the Athletics, good, very good. They're always going to hang around, but it doesn't match with that superstar talent they have in Houston. And even if Verlander's only half of himself when he comes back, getting that experienced pitcher who's been there in the World Series, who's been there in the playoffs, who can lead these young guys, these Framber Valdez, who obliterated the Rays last postseason. I think Kendall Graveman was a great pickup. I think Joe Ryan. Who did they trade? They traded
Miles Straw.
Joe Smith.
Joe Smith, yes.
Joe Smith and then Miles Straw too. Or
yeah.
Trade, yeah.
You got Phil Mauton. That was a good pickup for them.
I think they're going to be fine. I think they're going to get the West. I think they'll make a run. They're just not in contention with the Red Sox, White Sox, or Rays, I think.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
Pains me to say it, but I think I see the Astros as being a team that finds a way a lot of the time, though, even with the lack of pitching. Like you just saw last year was a prime example of that. They got so far in the postseason with less pitching than they even have this year, less bullpen, even more inexperienced guys here. So I kind of just see, I mean, I know this year is very different. The competition's a lot more stiff, especially in the American League, but or actually, I don't know if that's the teams who are good in the AL are making the competition pretty stiff. Might make the competition pretty stiff for the Astros. So I don't know, but I think they definitely. But I think their pitching still looks a little bit better, more experienced than it did last year. So I still see that Astros doing something good there.
I have no doubt in my mind they'll remain competitive, but I agree with Maxwell here in the sense that they are just not up to the standards with the White Sox, the Red Sox, and the Rays. And sure, they'll give them a hard-fought fight. They still could come out on top. It's just looking into it, I would still pit those 3 teams over the Astros. But, fellas, it looks like we're over an hour into the podcast. We've hit all the teams we need to hit, so I think we should wrap it up with a neat little bow here. Once again, Maxwell, thank you for coming on to your first ICVO podcast. It was a pleasure having you on. I hope you stick with us in the upcoming episodes. Ben, also just great to see you. And to the fans watching, we always appreciate you guys tuning in. Until next time, this is the ICVO podcast.